I'm happy to announce our next major club fishing tournament, the Spring Bass Bash, brought to you by the Basscast. The event is going to run from Saturday, April 26th through Sunday, June 15th at midnight. This is the biggest tournament I have done so far with over 13 cash prizes. I'm giving away $500 to the first place in the largemouth division and the smallmouth division, $200 to second place in both divisions, $150 to third place in both divisions, and that's not all. I'm giving away a plaque from first all the way to fifth place in both divisions, and I also have Big Fish Awards. I am giving away $100 plus a plaque to the 3 largest largemouth caught during the event. I am giving away $100 plus a plaque to the largest smallmouth caught in Pennsylvania waters, the largest smallmouth caught in Maryland waters, and the largest smallmouth caught in Virginia waters. But that's not all. I am also doing a side quest challenge here. I'm giving away $100 plus a plaque to the largest snakehead caught, $100 plus a plaque to the largest bluegill or sunfish caught, $100 and a plaque to the largest rock bass caught, and $100 plus a plaque to the largest crappie caught. This is over $1,700 in cash prizes, and there's so much more. Go check it out. Registration will continue all the way through May. If you'd like to join the event, check the link in the episode description for more details. Look at the episode description down below, click on the link, and you can sign up down below. Thank you. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to Fishing the DMV. I'm your host, Thomas Ahrens, and today we are heading back to the Upper James River. It's really considered Virginia's river, one of the longest rivers to basically completely self-contained within Virginia. And here I got Upper James River local Dalton Karnes on the show. Sir, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. I'm glad to be here, and you don't have to twist my arm to talk about fishing. So,
yeah, dude, and it's such a cool river, and it's a harder nut to crack to get people to come on and just kind of just talk about the history and what the place is like. Especially, I think nationally, if you think the James, you're gonna think Bassmasters, you're gonna think the Tidal, but you don't think about this massive stretch, really from the Jackson River, the pasture area, all the way down to Richmond proper itself. There's a lot of river that people don't know about.
Yeah, I mean, it is a ton, and people know about Jamestown. Like you said, they know about the big blue cats and the bass fishing in Richmond. And then outside of that, it's like, it just goes away. People don't think about that section above there. And, I'm biased. I've lived here my whole life and fished it since I could walk. But to me, it's a really, really neat fishery. It's a valuable fishery, and there's so many different kinds of fish species to catch there that people don't really realize, about it. Like you said, it's a super long river. I mean, all the way from the Jackson up in near Lake Mumma, and it's so diverse because up there, there's trout, and all the way down to, like you said, the tidal James, where you've got bowfin and swampy creatures. So it's amazing, from one side of the state to the next, just how varied it is within one watershed.
No, it really is, and there's so many species, and we'll definitely get to that. But as always, guys, with the new guests I have on the show is, what got you into fishing, and have you always lived near the James River?
Yeah, so I grew up in Bedford, lived here my whole life. Bedford is bordered on the very top, the whole way by the James River. It creates the boundary between our county and Amherst County. And my family's been here since like the late 1700s. And I guess if you live somewhere long enough, you just get curious about the stuff around you and learn about it. So my dad, before in cell phones and all that stuff, that's what they did. They went to the river and they went fishing, and, growing up, he would, that's what we did on the weekends. When I was big enough to hold a fishing rod, he threw me in the canoe because we didn't have kayaks back then, and we'd put in above, we call it the Snowden Dam. It's called Kershaw Dam, really, I think, but it's this big flat section. It's nice and safe. And he'd throw me in there. We'd go to the river and we'd fish every weekend as a little kid. And it just grew from there. Like as I got older, the whole gang would come, family and friends and cousins and uncles and everybody. And we'd go out there and we would float, somewhere on the Upper James or the Maury, which is a big tributary of it. And we would just take our canoes and a white grub and a head torpedo, and we'd go out there and you'd catch all kinds of fish. And all the older dudes are like telling me, like, man, we used to catch 100 fish a day, and I just remember being a little kid and most of the fish back then were probably like 12 inches, but like we were just catching a ton of them. It was a blast. And I guess as I got older, things, you could branch out a little more, get a little bit more adventurous. Me and Dad would go like every weekend, and we'd go wading different places if we weren't floating with everybody. And I don't think at the time we realized like how special the fishery was. We would take a canoe and a wind up disposable Walmart camera and an ultralight rod and tube baits. And we were slaying fish, big fish. Some of them were probably like 6-pounders, and we didn't even know, like, we didn't even take pictures of them. We just put them back, some of them, and it was just like, different days, different times. But I think that's what really, that's kind of, got me into it. It was just Dad's love for it. And that kind of went through me, and it just became this like way of life of like, this is what we do. And then, I went to, as I got older and went to college, I could go out on my own, on the weekends, after classes, like me and my friends, like we're not playing video games. We're not smoking pot. Like we went to the river, and so we just go fishing all the time, catching flatheads, catching smallmouth. And yeah, that's kind of my history of like being here around it, and like how it just grew this passion for fishing. It was really like a gateway drug in a way to like lead me to into the passion of fishing.
It's a gateway drug. When you paint a picture mentally of a summer evening wading a river or floating a river, dude, it is the most American thing possible. And that is how you will 100% hook anybody on fishing, with that scenario right there.
Yeah. Absolutely. That, like I said, those are like memories that I'll cherish forever. Just like, me and Dad on the river, like early morning, like in the middle of May, like perfect water levels, and just like bouncing a tube off of like behind a rock and just, bam, like it doesn't get any better than that. Like you said, throwing a buzz bait, like, gosh, who's thrown a buzz bait in a while, but
oh my goodness. Well, it's the same with the white grub. I remember that from my childhood, but it feels like the little swim baits have kind of taken over that niche.
Yes. Yeah. But no. And go ahead. Yeah.
Oh, I was going to say, you mentioned earlier about the old guy saying like it wasn't as good as it once was and all of that. From your childhood till now, like you've seen the river go through some ups and downs. So was it the best it ever was back when you were a kid? Like, where would you say it is now?
I think that the numbers were a lot like, my dad's generation, they talked about catching, 100 plus fish a day. And I have done that once in my life. It doesn't happen very much. But so I think the numbers have come down. So probably about that time, like 2007 ish, when I was like, really getting into it and old enough, me and Dad were going, there was a fish kill. We'd pull in fish and they would have sores on them and stuff. And that really, it affected, I think, the Shenandoah and some of those a lot. It affected the James some. And so I think that hurt it. We had some really bad spawn years. Like in my recent lifetime memory, like 2018 and 2020, it just flooded constantly. And I think that really hurt the spawn years. But I think I say all that to say, in my experience, maybe you're not going to go out there and catch 100 fish, but you're still going to catch, if you float all day, you're still probably going to catch 10 to 30 fish. And I think the size of those fish are going to be bigger. I mean, and maybe it was just because I was younger, but when you saw like a big fish when I was a kid, it was like, oh my God, that's, you had a pound fish, like that's a monster, and I mean, the past probably 10 years, like I can't tell you how many citations I caught. Not trying to brag, but it's just like, I think the quantity is down, but the quality is up. And I think that the fishery has recovered from some of those, bad spawn years and stuff. And I'm seeing very recently, at least, I think it's recovering in a big way. I think we had some really good spawn years the past couple of years with some decent springs. So I would say that it's maybe not what a lot of the old timers remember, where you can go and, throw a white grub behind a rock and catch a fish every cast. But if you know where they're at, you're going to catch fish. And I think they're going to be bigger. And I've always been a quality over quantity person anyways. So.
It's so interesting because, as human beings, we kind of suffer from this where it's like it's always better in the past, no matter what it was. It's built into our brain. And some instances, I think that's true. In other instances, I don't know. The James, like I know damn near nothing about it. I know I grew up on the Shenandoah, the Upper Potomac. And when I was a kid in the early 2000s, that place sucked. I mean, it felt like every bass was killed because of that virus. I mean, it felt like it. Yeah. So I can say like right now where it's taking almost 100 inches to win kayak tournaments, like it feels amazing that like, it feels like it's the best it's ever been. That's because it came from such a hole that it was in. Yep. So the water quality sounds like it's pretty good. Like you don't float down the river and going to have gills forming on the side of your neck or anything like that. It's not bad.
No. I mean, I think, and like I said, I'm biased, but it's a pretty pristine water source. I mean, a long time ago, there was a lot of commerce kind of, going up and down the river. But I mean, now, you have Midwest Vaco or Rockton or whatever it is up on the Jackson. But I mean, other than that, like above Lynchburg, there's the paper mill in Big Island. Other than that, I mean, it's just farms and woods and pristine. I mean, just some of the most beautiful scenery you've ever seen. Crystal clear water. The biggest thing you have to deal with is cows. So it's I think a very healthy fishery. What caused the initial fish killing stuff, I don't know that they ever really determined exactly. But you don't have a lot of industrial stuff, pollution, things like that. I wade in the river all the time, and maybe stupidly, but I never worry about it at all. Not even a little bit. So.
What do you consider the upper portion? Like, how would you break the segments up of the river?
Yeah, in my mind, so the James, I guess, is officially formed in Iron Gate. There's actually a little road. You can see it right off 220. If you take a right or look your head right, there's a road called Head of the James. And right there is where the Cowpasture River and the Jackson come together. And so in my mind, it's probably defined differently by different people, but from right there in Iron Gate to, I always say like Joshua Falls, which is like one float down from Lynchburg. That's kind of in my mind, like the Upper James. And then from there to Richmond has always in my mind been like the Middle James. And then from Richmond, down to the mouth of Chesapeake is like tidal Lower James. That's how I've always broken it up. And I've been on every section from the Jackson at Lake Mumah all the way down to Joshua Falls. I've been on the lower section from Richmond all the way down to Chesapeake Bay, but I've honestly only been on the middle section a handful of times. It's just not an area that I've gone a whole lot, but
Wow. And then for the people that will be watching this upload on YouTube, I'm going to be sharing a map right now just to kind of give a vibe for people that aren't used to the area. So the cow pasture is up near the Iron Gate area. And then again, the Jackson is kind of created by Moomaw, which is already stated, and cow pasture come together at the confluence. And that goes all the way down to Salisbury. And what's crazy to think when you scoot out this map, you're above Smith Mountain Lake. That is crazy to think this is the river that dumps into basically the Chesapeake Bay.
Yeah.
And man, you get so much water from cow pasture, confluence, Iron Gate, all the way to Lynchburg. Like I really don't appreciate how much water you have to work with.
Yeah, I mean, the headwaters of some of that, I mean, it's all the way up in Highland County almost. And comes all the way down. The Mar is up in like Goshen with the calf pasture. You have Craig's Creek. That's a huge tributary. That's coming out of like Craig County. So it's a massive, massive watershed. But for the most part, luckily, it's all just, woods and cow pastures, so when you get a hard rain, the river's it's gonna muddy up, it's gonna get brown for a few days, but it clears right up most of the time, and it gets that nice green hue, and that's like beautiful to me. That's like go time, like hit the river,
How for people to visualize it, how wide are we talking at, let's say, the confluence of the cow pasture, the Jackson? Can you throw a baseball across it? Is it as wide as the Susquehanna River? Like, what's the vibe width-wise?
At that part, yeah, I mean, you can throw a baseball across it. Like, it's honestly, it not nearly like the Susquehanna. I mean, we're talking, 100 yards wide, maybe not even that in places. The farther down you go, obviously the wider, but at that portion for a lot of it, it's a 100, 200 yard wide in most areas, river, until you start getting down to probably near the Glasgow area. It starts to pick up a lot. When the Maury dumps into it, that's a pretty big tributary, and it picks up a lot of flow from that. And from there on, the river changes a lot. That's also right before it becomes not free flowing per se for a while. So that all the sections above there, except for Moomaw, are free flowing, no impediments, impoundments, or anything. From essentially the Snowden area to Lynchburg, there's 7 dams. 7 in a row. They're all like privately owned. One of them is I think owned by the town of Bedford. It supplies power to the town, but it's not actually manned by them, I think. But there's 7 in a row. They don't actually create like lakes. The water's pretty much free flowing over some of them, but they're used for hydroelectric power, most of them. And so that changes the river drastically. The fishing's still great. It's just you have to tackle it a little bit differently.
How deep we talking with the dams? Just spitballing. Is it like a 10-foot at the dam? Is it 20?
They're all a little different.
Okay.
But for the most part, yeah, probably at the max, we're talking 20 foot maybe. The what they call Rusens Dam, it was once called Judith Creek or Judith Dam because of Judith Creek, which dumps in there. That one is the most modern. It's been updated, and that's the biggest one. And that impoundment is also probably the deepest. That creates an area above Monacan Parkway, and that one there, I mean, it's deep enough like you can put a bass boat in, no problem. You can jet ski through there. But yeah, I mean, we're talking 10, 20 foot most. Some of them shallower than that, probably just because of stuff that's built up in them over time.
I never knew about this. This is really cool. I didn't know that there were all these dams on the river. Wow.
Yeah, it's 7 in a row. The last one is right in Lynchburg. The one in Lynchburg and the one in Big Island are both not actually hydroelectric. They're used for one of the one Big Island's used for water for the paper mill for the activities there, and then the one in Lynchburg is used. It used to be used for water for used to be Griffith Pipe. I can't remember what it is now, but there's a business there that manufactures pipe, and that, and it used to be part of a water source for the city of Lynchburg. They still pull water from it, but not from up there at that part now. So
interesting. Yeah, I mean, guys, I just learned something because I'm looking at the map. I thought, you could basically just drop a boat in Lynchburg and then haul ass all the way up to the Jackson if you wanted. So that's interesting to know that that's not probably the smartest decision to do. Huh.
No, so it makes navigating a little tough because once you get down to the Kershaw Dam or Snowden area, all of a sudden you have to start figuring out ways around it. Now, the fishing is great, in and around all those sections. And most of them at least have access for the most part that you can go up and down, but you can't do a nice float from one to the other really, unless you want to, trespass or, work very hard to get around them. Couple sections actually don't have any access. So from Rusin's Dam to Lynchburg has no public access.
Wow.
From the Holcomb Rock Dam, which is above Rusin's, to no, take it back. It has Monacan Park there. So, but anyways, there's a couple of sections that don't have any public access. Coleman Falls to Holcomb Rock, that's the one. It doesn't have any public access, so it's kind of funky. It's kind of, but still great fishing, just not free flowing. But then from Lynchburg all the way to like Bosher's Dam, probably down near Richmond, that thing's free flowing, and so below Lynchburg, you can actually get, like I have seen with my own eyes, runs of like gizzard shad and lampreys and stuff coming up.
Wow.
They've even caught walleye in that part that have come from, presumably, I'm assuming, they stock like Lake Cheston and some of that. And I'm guessing they've come up from somewhere that they've stocked downstream, but people have caught walleye in that section. Historically, I mean, back before all the dams and settlers and stuff, I mean, there's reports and stuff of stripers coming all the way up to Lynchburg to Buchanan, shad coming all the way to Buchanan,
That's crazy, man.
In fact, the dam there in Lynchburg, there's this weird like thing in the middle of it. And my whole life I was like, what is this thing? And I read a book one time and I figured out it was a shad ladder. It was a fish ladder that they made to try to let the fish passage above the dam. It didn't work. But yeah, so it's amazing that, like, in theory, stripers should be able to come all the way up there if they wanted to.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Were some of these dams at all have to do with the canals, or the canals separate?
Yeah. So they are directly related to the canal. So the canal, and you can't hardly even talk about like the James without the canal. It's like this, like, they're linked together. But yeah, all those dams were actually once a part of the canal system. They were locks for the canal. And I didn't know that most of my life. I had no idea until I started researching it. And, because we would go to the James and we would be, fishing, and we would be standing on the thing sometimes, because there's all these remnants, like everywhere you go, there's these like stacked, beautifully, like perfectly cut, perfectly stacked like rocks, and we paid no attention to it. We would go down and we would like stand on and fish off of it and stuff. And one day I'm just like, what are these things? And I started realizing that, like, oh, it's this canal system that they used to have. And that's what the dams actually are, were remnants of the dams, that some of the dams that they had to transport water, through the canal locks to get, boats and stuff up there. And just throughout time, they took them and they modernized them and, reworked them a little bit. The Rusin's Dam I was talking about, That one is the most modern. The base is actually still the old dam, but the new dam is on top. But some of them, like the dam there at the paper mill in Big Island, I mean, it's pretty much almost exactly like it was in the 1860s. Um, it's amazing. I mean, all the floods, all the things, and they're still there being used to this day.
Have you had any floods in recent memory that were pretty bad for the river in that area that you can remember?
Yeah. So, like I kind of mentioned briefly earlier, it seemed like 2018 and 2020, it just like flooded constantly. Like no matter, I mean, and it was, of course, it was like April, May, I mean, just like perfect fishing time, right, either pre-spawn or post-spawn. And that whole year, we had some really bad ones. It just rained constantly. And it was, I think, detrimental at the time to the smallmouth fishery for sure. Luckily, it didn't get bad enough really that it damaged, any people per se or anything. But, nothing like, around here, everybody talks about the flood of 85. I don't know if that's a thing for the rest of Virginia, but like the flood of 85, like everybody talks about that. And when that happened, I mean, there was like water to the top of the paper mill. I mean, it was like astronomical flooding. And there was some bad ones even prior to, before that. Like I think late 60s, there was a really bad one. But recent memory, those are the kind of worst ones I can remember. And it wasn't even really like one event. It was just like it rained and rained and rained constantly, and it would go down just enough, and then it would rain again. But you just kind of had to switch where you're fishing and what you're doing and how you're fishing. I actually got more into flathead fishing that year because like it kind of stunk it up a little bit for the smallmouth, but like the flatheads loved it. They didn't care how much water it was, and it kind of brought them up into some of the structure that they normally couldn't get to. And so like all fishing, just being flexible and dealing with what you're given.
What's the flathead scene like on the James? Other places like the Susquehanna has gotten really big for them. Places out in the Midwest, down south. But so, what's the culture of flathead fishing and all that stuff?
I mean, I think it's getting bigger, really. Above probably like the Snowden area. I've never caught one. I think that they're there. I've seen some like musky gads catch them. But kind of in that area from there, around the seven dams and really on down to Richmond. I mean, they're plentiful. I mean, tons of people fish for them in the Big Island area. Because it's deep enough. You can take a boat and you can go out there and set up, anchor up and use your big cat rods. And right in Lynchburg, I mean, there's a huge fishery for them. Clubs hold tournaments and do a lot of fishing for them. And then on down to Richmond. And I think, there's a great fishery for them right there in Richmond. Different times of the years, it's better or worse, but I think it's getting a lot bigger. There's a lot more people doing it. And just in my lifetime, I think I've seen it grow, which has kind of been a positive and a negative in a way, because, I people around here always are like, oh, well, the smallmouth or, the muskie are eating them all. That's why there's not as many there. And, I think there's a lot of factors in it. I think the muskie are a very small part of that. I think, the fish kill, a lot of stuff we were talking about earlier has more to do with that. But if there's any fish species that has had an effect, I would say it would be flatheads, because there's a lot more of them than when I first started fishing. And I think they're eating a lot more. They're going to eat a lot more of the fish species that the smallmouth are either eating, or they're eating the smallmouth more than I think the muskie are. And they're top dog. I mean, they are the apex predator.
Hey everyone, quick little announcement here from Fishing the DMV. Our club membership on Patreon is nearly full. There are only 6 membership spots still available. Once these spots are gone, they're gone, and I'll be closing down the club membership to new members until 2026. At that point, you can try to sign up, but it'll be at a higher rate. All Patreon members will receive 5% off their orders to Jake's Bait and Tackle, 10% off their orders to Tiger Crankbaits, 10% off their orders to Catoctin Creek Rods. You'll also gain access to our private Facebook group community. You'll also be allowed to enter our 5 club membership tournaments only with guarantee payouts, members only content, ad-free, commercial-free episodes of the podcast, Patreon support or giveaways, and so much more. And you get all of this for $6 a month, which is less than a pack of Cincos or a jackhammer chatterbait. And since we're under our 10 membership spot, I'm going to do something else. I'm going to give everyone a 10% off their membership if they sign up for the year. So that brings it down to under $65 a year, locked in indefinitely as long as you want to be a member. Hurry up because there's only so many spots left before I shut down the club to any new members until 2026.
I don't think people give them enough credit for how good of predators they are compared. Like everyone wants to say the muskie's an apex predator, and rightfully you give them their due. But a flathead it's a shark. If you ever seen the mouth on that thing, how it hunts and everything, it doesn't just graze off the bottom. It actively hunts.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, people think catfishing and they think like, oh, you take a chicken gizzard and you throw it out there on the hook and like, you can catch them on that. But I mean, I catch them on crankbaits all the time.
Swim baits for me. Yep.
Not even trying. Like, I'm trying to catch smallmouth and stuff, and all of a sudden, wham, and it's like, well, I know what that is. Like, so yeah, I mean, they're a predator, and it's awesome because it's fun, and they get huge, and like I said, I think it's becoming more and more a big sport fish on the James. But then there's times where I'm like, man, this spot that I used to catch, like, more musky or more smallmouth, I'm catching a lot of like 5 to 10 pound flatheads. Is there a correlation? Maybe not, maybe so. I've never actually done a study, just kind of an observation,
When you're fishing all these areas, and I probably should have asked this earlier, are you fishing on the bank, a kayak, a jet boat? What do you generally fish from or out of?
I do a lot of just kayak and wade fishing for multiple reasons. One, that's just what I grew up doing. My dad didn't have a boat. It was just, I think, what he grew up doing, and so it was just kind of passed down to me. I feel it kind of more intimate. Like I just feel more like when you're down in the water, like wading around with them. Not only are you, to me, there's this concept of like, when you go on a float, you might be floating 13 miles but it's impossible to fish that 13 miles, fully, so like when you're wading a spot, like you have found a location where like there's fish, they're there and you can really work that area, like at the prime hour, at the prime time. So that's one reason I do it. And it's just, I do a lot after work, and so it's like, to me, it's like I keep the kayak on the truck, I get off work, it's already there. I can go to this one spot, throw the kayak off. I don't have to worry about whether the battery's charged or I got enough gas. I just put in, and I'm fortunate enough where I'm at that there's plenty of spots to put the kayak in that I can get around myself, and I can get out and I can get into spots that boats can't always get. So that's what I do a lot of. But, there's certainly something to be said for, jet boats. I've often thought about getting one. I have a boat, but it's a boat that I bought more for fishing like the Lower James or like Smith Mountain Lake. I bought a raft back in 2019 because I really started getting into musky fishing. Yeah, because I mean, we would go on the James and just be bass fishing, and all of a sudden you'd hang a muskie on a whopper plopper. And I mean, we used to do it all the time, like not even trying. And it was like, man, if we actually fish for these things, and so we started actually fishing for them, but we'd fish for them like from a kayak. And it takes about one muskie in a kayak for you to figure out, I need a bigger boat. And yeah. And so it was one of these things where it was like, do I buy a jet boat? Do I do that? So I started seeing these guys using rafts, and I was like, that's a cool idea. Like you can go super shallow. You don't need, once again, batteries, gas, anything. You don't have to register it. So I found one, and I started using that a lot, and kind of went down that rabbit hole, and that's become huge. Still have a lot of fun with it. Don't go as much as I used to for them, but so I use that quite a bit, that or my kayak or just wading, a lot.
When did you start getting obsessed or passionate, depending on everyone's point of view, with the Master Angler program? How did that become a thing in your life?
I've been kind of dabbling with that for probably about 10 years. At this point, I think like I said earlier, kind of just growing up on the river, it was like, we caught all these, smallmouth all the time. We would catch a muskie here and there. We would catch a flathead. And, it was like, I got to a certain point where it was like, man, I've caught like a million smallmouth. Like, what else is in the river? It was like, okay, flathead, that's cool. Okay, muskie, that's cool. Okay, carp, that's fun. And then it was like, I caught these other species, and it was like, I started, researching about some of them, and it was like, oh, there's this thing through the game department. It's like this like challenge you can do to like catch all these fish species. And I was like, that'd be neat, like, what if I like caught all of them, and so I think that's what really got me into it, was like, it wasn't really this idea of like, oh man, like, I'm going to like win the Master Angler like I'm going to be the first, it was like, man, let's just like, what else can we catch? Like, that'd be neat. And so that the James was kind of like the gateway drug that like brought me to that, in a weird path, and then it just kind of grew from there. And I started off, just with the ones that I mentioned already that I knew how to catch, that were right around me. And then it was like, okay, well, what's next and closest, and I just kind of started working my way out from my home territory and branching out. And I would just go down the list and research a fish and pick like one that I thought was reasonable, and research like, where do I have to catch it? What bait do I need to use? Like, where do I, go to get this thing? And it has taken me a lot of places, through a lot of experiences that I would have never done before. I mean, swamps and, far Southwest Virginia and coal country. And I mean, all over the state. To all these like just amazing places, and outside of just the fish, I mean, I think that's been the cool part, is like just all the different, like, our state we're so fortunate to live in this state where it's like, in 5 hours, 4 hours, you can be like in a trout stream or the Chesapeake Bay, and it's like, where else can you do that, and getting to experience all of that, through these like very specific like goals, and that's the part that drives me, is like, every fish is a new like goal and a new puzzle, and the puzzle pieces are out there, and like anybody can find the puzzle pieces, but nobody knows where they're all at, so you have to go out and find them and put them all together. And then that's the really like fun and super frustrating part. But like, I would have never done any of that if like my dad hadn't put me in a canoe and like we went fishing for smallmouth, so it's crazy kind of how it has led me to there. I think I've got like 19 thus far.
Wow.
I probably have some more that like, honestly, we caught back in the day. And like I said, I mean, we never even used to take a scale or anything. It was just, so like I probably need to recatch those, but yeah, it's taken me on a journey that really started with the Upper James. So,
is there any places outside the James that stick out in your mind of cool adventures? You said swamp and mountains and stuff.
yeah, I mean, it's funny because, like I said, I grew up like fishing like in the mountains, like like up here, like and and so when I first started going to some of these places, like in the tidal areas and stuff, I didn't know exactly how I'd like it, but honestly, like I love that. Like there's some places like on the Blackwater River or the Chickahominy that like, man, they're just awesome. Like you can put a boat or a kayak in and like literally just feel like you're like 100 years in the past. You're going through these like swamps and there's nobody around, and it's just like, for me, it's such a neat experience because it's something that like I didn't grow up doing. It's like being in a completely different world. So those are really, I love those fisheries. I think they're really neat. Trying to think of some other really neat ones. Yeah, like I've taken some trips like to the Clinch and the Powell River, and that's really neat. Once again, it's just like you feel like you're kind of stepping back in time. I do quite a bit of trout fishing too. So like going up in a lot of different places and like Highland County and places like that where it's like, I mean, you don't see a soul all day. You're wandering through the mountains, there's some really neat places up there too. But
Fly rod or spinning rod?
I mostly spin rod. I have a fly rod. I know how to use it. Not well. Like I bought it with the intent of like, oh man, I'm going to get into this. Like I need another hobby, And then it was like, if I have to go 30 times and not catch a fish before I can get good at this thing, it's like the whole point's catching fish, right? And so I kind of put it down and I haven't put it back in my hand recently, but I might pick it back up one day.
Is there a species that is next on your list that you really want to catch and you're starting to gear up to pursue this year?
Yeah. I try to keep it like realistic. Like, when I first started doing it, it was like, bam, 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 I'm going to do all these things. And like every other weekend I was trying for like a different species. And then I realized like, that's pretty unrealistic. So I try to kind of like keep it within reason. This year, I've been really trying to hit freshwater drum. I've caught freshwater drum before. I've caught a few that were like, several inches away from in a citation. It's just I haven't got the one. Bowfin. I've caught a bunch of bowfin, but I've just never caught one that was, citation worthy. Chain pickerel, same way, like half an inch away. So those are kind of like ones that are like realistically on my list. I kind of have like dream list ones that are like going to be really hard that I'm like, I'm going to kind of save them for last. And then like the ones that like, I think within the next, 1 to 5 years, like I'll have those, so those are kind of my goals already. And I've been actually already trying this year for a couple of them. So
freshwater drum pull hard. I don't think they get the props they deserve just as a fish to catch for fun.
Yeah, I think there's this big stigma around a lot of fish like that. But yeah, for some reason, drum in particular, it's like, and it's never made any sense to me because people love red drum. People love, it's like people are like obsessed with them. And it's like, well, what's the difference? It's just this one lives in fresh water. And to me, it's like, anytime a fish can, I mean, I'll catch anything, but anytime a fish can get, 30 pounds, like I'm in, like say where, and we're lucky we have a few spots in the state that actually have some decent amounts of them. And they're not enough where you catch them every cast, but, I think they're fun. They're fun as heck,
They're a lot of fun. And that's the problem with a lot of these species. There is stigma around them where example is like carp fishing. Huge in Europe. I know it's been talked ad nauseum, but when the cicada hatch was big and you could catch them on topwater, whether it's spinning or fly, and those things will lock up any equipment. Those things can rip drag. It's insane how strong they are.
I love carp. I mean, I'm a trash fish fisherman. Like I adore carp, honestly. I like I said, I go after work a lot, and sometimes I'll kind of like making my goal of like how many species can I catch tonight. So I mean, I'll have my little kayak loaded up with like as many rods as I can fit in it, and I'll like go carp fishing first, catch some carp, try to catch a smallmouth, then try to stay till dark and catch a flathead. And I love carp. I mean, they're easy to catch, and like for the most part, and they get big and they fight hard, and it's kind of like bobber fishing with worm. It's one of those things where it's like you could put a little kid on a carp and just have an absolute ball, and they just pull drag. So.
Mm-hmm.
But
no, dude, it's insane how strong they are, and there are so many, like snakehead is another cult classic that people really get into. Suckers, fall fish, that's another thing. When they get bigger, those things will pull extremely hard.
For sure.
With the Upper James, what is access like? Is it a lot of private land? Is it hard to get there, or are there a lot of boat ramps that people can use to access the river?
It's actually really good. When I was younger, there were a lot of private places that were just like, good old farmers that like let you put in. And a lot of those have actually since been, bought by the game department with partnerships with like the James River Association or somebody like that. So there's 11 different like floatable sections. And then most of the like impounded sections I was talking about have boat ramps that you can put in at and go in. I think all but like two of them have really good boat ramps that like you can put like a boat in. But from Iron Gate to Glasgow to Snowden, there's boat ramps that whole way. You have. Let me think. Iron Gate to Glen Wilton to Gala to Eagle Rock to Horseshoe Bend to Springwood to Buchanan to Arcadia to Alpine to Natural Bridge or Glasgow to Snowden. So, I mean, you've got a boat ramp of every kind. Now, some of those are just kayak only, just hand launch. Some of them, you can back a trailer down, and I mean, guys that musky fish hardcore, like, they're putting their jet boats in there all the time. So I would say it's really good access for people. There's like several, like in Buchanan, there's a company called Twin Rivers that does, they do like shuttle services, and you can rent kayaks and stuff. So there's a ton of people getting on the water there. Most of them are just kind of floating, but like, it's getting people on the river and exposing the James to it. Right there in Glasgow at Locher's Landing, that's the put in to go float Balcony Falls, which is kind of famous. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but it's one of the like biggest like whitewater sections. It's certainly above the fall line. It's probably the biggest whitewater, rapids on the James for sure. And I mean, that's a super popular float. We used to fish it religiously when I was a kid because I mean, it's excellent smallmouth territory. I rarely go there anymore just because there are so many, people, but like, it's not a bad thing. Like, it's a good thing for the town of Glasgow. It's a great thing for like just the James in general. And then there's actually a lot of guides that, are fishing the river now. And that's a great way for people that like may not have like boats and, different stuff or any knowledge, to book a way to get on the river. So.
The section below Lynchburg all the way to the James, I guess we've hyped up everything above Lynchburg. What is it like, again, just kind of reiterating here, the fishing like below?
I like that section a lot. Now, like I said, I haven't been much past Joshua Falls area. I've put in Scottsville before, and some of the like Cartersville area, and I know some guys that fish that area a lot, and they catch a ton of smallmouth, a lot of flatheads. The section from Lynchburg to the Joshua Falls, float is one of my favorites, honestly. I mean, we've had days where we absolutely slayed smallmouth, nice smallmouth. There's muskie in there. That's about as far down as they go. Once you get probably like the 29 bridge is as far down as I've seen one, which is probably, that's a little ways above the end of that float. But there's muskie in there, a lot of flatheads, channel cats. Like I said, people have even caught walleye in that section. There's largemouth. You start to get a lot of largemouth intermingled in that part. So I love that section. If there's two put-ins right in like Lynchburg, one of them is on the Amherst County side, and then one of them is hand-launched kayak site right in Lynchburg. And I'll go all the time after work. I'll take my wife there, and you can put in there and just sort of piddle around for an afternoon. And I mean, there's all kinds of stuff. There's even gar in that part.
Oh wow!
Yeah, there's gar that come all the way up, there and stay in that part, and they're a blast. And so I really enjoy that section. Lynchburg's a cool town. It's sort of, to me, like a mini Richmond. It's got that very like RVA sort of feel. I went to school at Lynchburg College, so like I spent a lot of time there. We would do labs on the James, and I'd go down there after, class and stuff. And so I really like that section. I think it's it starts to get bigger there. So there's a little more, diversity and just different stuff that hasn't been kind of, caught up from the dams and stuff.
It's interesting because, when you look at the size of this river, it will take you almost a lifetime if you wanted to fish or explore the whole thing. It's just fascinating about how big it is, but then how, I don't know, not secretive is not even the right word, but it's overlooked.
Yeah.
Like so many big stretches of this place.
Yep. Well, like you said, in kind of the beginning, I think a lot of people, the lower James kind of like, world renowned for catfish and bass now, but I don't think a lot of people realize that like how much water there is above it. They do the Botetourt Festival every year in June, and that starts in Lynchburg and goes 120 miles down. It takes them 8 days, and now that a lot of that's on bateaus and not just like regular kayaks. But I mean, that's how long you're talking, if you just went down, it's a lot of water. It's a lot of water.
It's a lot of water.
Yeah.
And the fact that, if it wasn't for the canals and stuff, that was a major way that resources were moved up and down, way back in the day. And I don't know, the history in that whole area is just fascinating.
Yeah, no, I mean, it is really neat. It's really neat to think, like I mentioned Monacan Park earlier, that's named after the Monacan Indian tribe. And so historically, like that was, the Monacan Indians, ruled that area for thousands of years until the settlers came. And the James was kind of the gateway to the West. It's called America's River, because of Jamestown and stuff like that. But there was this grand idea that like that was the way we were going to, get to all this stuff out here to the West. That was America's like, path to get there. The James River Kanawha company that made the canal, their first idea was not just, hey, we're going to get up the James, but hey, we're going to get all the way over to the Kanawha watershed and then go to the Ohio and then down the Mississippi, and we're going to be able to get our goods from the Chesapeake Bay to New Orleans. which is just insane to think about, even by today's standards, but they had it all planned out, and they made the canals, and they functioned actually from Richmond to Lynchburg, and then from Lynchburg to the town of Buchanan. That one was they completed that one in 1851. They tried to make it up to Covington, and they started, and they didn't quite finish before. People think the trains killed the canal. It played a role, but mostly it was just bad financial planning and just the floods. Every time it would flood, it'd just destroy it, and they'd have to rebuild it and spend all this money to rebuild it. And so it was abandoned. And it just happened that at the same time, trains also came about. And, we were talking about the dams earlier being a part of that. Most people also don't know that most of the train tracks that run right along the James are actually the old tow roads for the canals. That's what they used when the canal went bankrupt. The railroad bought the right of way and put the tracks on the tow road for the canals. So they live on, and it's really neat to go and be fishing, and you just get this like sense of history. You're fishing, in this spot, and there's this old, just like beautiful, like stacked rock structure, and it just kind of really puts you back in it. It brings it's this blend of like, the past and today, because it's like being, still used by all this stuff, and we're not using it for commerce and stuff anymore, but like there's this, this huge like recreational, like beautiful natural, thing we're doing it with it now, and so it's kind of rebirthed itself,
It's crazy, man. It really is. And it's still rural, it's still wild, which is good to see. If you had one wish and you could improve something about the Upper James, what would it be?
Oh man, that's tough. That's really tough. Did I get to fish it more?
Yeah, that could be one of the wishes.
That's really tough.
How about a less controversial question? You can only fish a Ned rig or a tube the rest of your life. Which one would it be? Are you team Ned rig or team tube? Because smallmouth guys, I know they're one or the other. Very rarely both.
I'm team tube, man. That's just I that's my near and dear to my heart. I mean, if I go to the river, I bring all this stuff, but like I don't need but like 5 baits.
You really don't. Something I'm going to try to throw more this year is the Helgramite too, because all the old guys around the Shenandoah just swear by it, and I never really fished that growing up. I did fish a tube a lot, but then I got into the Ned rig thing, and it's served me well. But I'm also very bad at experimenting.
Yeah, I also get like sort of stuck and like, well,
locked in.
This thing works, like it's always worked, and it's like the number one like sin of fishing is like getting stuck, in your same old things, and it's like the river is constantly changing, and so you kind of have to constantly change with it. And there's things that are always going to work. I mean, if I take a jig, a spinner bait, a crankbait, and depending on the time of year, a whopper plopper to the river, like I'm gonna catch a smallmouth, but it changes, and you got to change with it a little bit too. And I also need to get better at that,
Right on, dude. I mean, Dalton, I really appreciate you coming on today. It's been an absolute blast to be able to talk about the river that I think it's overlooked and underappreciated compared to the Susquehanna, places like that. Is there anything that we forgot to talk about that we should cover?
I don't think so. I think, kind of like what you said. I mean, I think it's a great fishery. I mean, it doesn't have the state record muskie like the new or the state record smallmouth, but like, I think they're there or darn close, I've seen 40-pound flatheads pulled out of it, and to me, it's a really cool fishery. It's one that doesn't get fished a lot, which I'm kind of like, good, I'll fish it more. But like, I think it's neat that I think more people could utilize it. And, It's a really diverse fishery. It's a cool area that not a lot of people really appreciate. And, I hope that, maybe somebody sees this video and goes out there and it becomes their gateway drug, like it was mine. So.
Yeah, and hopefully it just raises more awareness for the fishery, and people will be able to communicate to the department or other organizations, the river keepers, things that they could do to improve it. I didn't even know about those dams. I didn't realize like there's that many dams on the Upper James, and again, just the vastness of it. It can be daunting. I think if you wanted to go down there, like where the hell you would even start. It's pretty cool though. It really is. But Dalton, again, I really appreciate you coming on. Is there anyone that we can give a shout out to, or any businesses or anything like that we could promote?
I think I mentioned Twin Rivers. There's some guides that I know on the upper part that do a lot of stuff. Virginia Trophy Guides, Blue Ridge Muskie. They're out there. River Road Jet Boats. If you're looking to get a jet boat, they're right there in downtown Lynchburg. There's just some really cool towns, Buchanan, Lynchburg, Covington. They're all neat little towns. So, the Appalachian Trail goes right across the river at the footbridge in Big Island, So if you're looking for a place to just go exploring and see a neat town and, book a guide, there's tons of opportunities out there. So
awesome. Yep. That's awesome stuff. Guys, as always, I'm going to link everything that he talked about in the episode description. If you have any questions about, where to launch your boat, things like that, you can always email me, fishingthedmv@gmail.com, or you could reach out to me on Facebook or Instagram. If you'd like to, guys, please reach out if you'd like to be on the show, or if you just have some cool stories to talk about. A lot of this is a community-based channel. So if you just have a cool story, or you want to talk about something that's passionate to you, just, message me. Feel free to reach out and we'll get it going. And we'll see you guys next time on Fishing the DMV. Bye. You're listening to Fishing the DMV with your host, Thomas Ahrens. Fishing the DMV is brought to you by Jake's Bait and Tackle, located in Winchester, Virginia.
If that doesn't get you jacked up, I don't know what will.